Listen, just one more thing.
Hello there. Welcome to my review of the first episode of Season 2 of Columbo, Etude in Black. First broadcast on September the 17th, 1972 on NBC. It was written by Stephen Bochco, based on a story by Lincoln Levinson. The episode was directed by Nicholas Colasanto. Colasanto was born January 19th, 1924 in Rhode Island. He served with the US Navy during World War II, and he took up acting relatively late in life at around age 30. He gained some one-off roles in television, including Car 54 Where Are You?, Ben Casey, and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, as well as some minor film roles in Family Plot and Raging Bull, but achieved greater success as a TV director. He directed episodes of Ironside, Hawaii Five-0, Bonanza, Starsky and Hutch, and of course this episode of Columbo. Later in life, as he was contemplating his retirement, he landed his most well-known and most beloved role as Ernie Coach Pantuso in Cheers.
Cheers? Yeah, just a sec. Is there an Ernie Pantuso here?
That's you, Coach.
Speaking.
However, the health problems that had plagued his life continued to worsen. He kept this hidden from the cast and crew of Cheers and died from a heart ailment on February the 12th, 1985. The episode begins with Alex Benedict at his piano before he runs up his grand staircase and pours himself a drink. Alex Benedict is played by John Cassavetes. Cassavetes was born December the 9th, 1929 in New York. He spent his early years in Greece before returning to the US at age 7. He studied at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts and graduated in 1950. He would meet his future wife Gina Rowlands at the Academy and would go on to perform in small roles in film and television before setting up his own acting studio in 1956 as a reaction against the method being taught by Lee Strasberg. During this time he would develop his own film projects which he would write, direct and sometimes act in, as well as appearing in films such as The Dirty Dozen and A Memorable Turn in Rosemary's Baby, but was far more focused on his own projects, with his company of actors which included his wife Rowlands, who would earn her 2 Oscar nominations for appearances in Cassavetes films, and his good friends Ben Gazzara and Peter Falk. These films include Husbands, Opening Night, Gloria, and A Woman Under the Influence, amongst others. Cassavetes was a long-term alcoholic who died on February the 3rd, 1989 from cirrhosis of the liver. He was 59. Benedict takes his initialed briefcase and puts a cloth inside, along with a letter purporting to be from a Jenifer Welles that looks like a suicide note. He then leaves his grand mansion, which has been incorrectly identified as the Banks residence from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air in some corners of the internet, but this is incorrect. He jumps into his E-Type Jag, which he then drives to his specialist mechanic as he claims there is something wrong with it. The mechanic calls him Maestro, and if I've learned anything from Seinfeld, it's that means he's a conductor.
You know you hurt the maestro's feelings.
Bye, Maestro.
And boy does he talk like a conductor, or at least a very pretentious one, equating the engine parts of his car to sections of the orchestra, which I'm sure he does with everything and thinks it's hilarious and very clever, but I bet he wouldn't do the same if he were a gynecologist. He's already pretty obnoxious, and so you can guess he won't fall into the category of sympathetic murderer. He leaves his car with the mechanic and is picked up by his wife after pretending to use the bathroom at the garage so he can unlock the bathroom window. Because he's obnoxious, he makes his wife move over so he can drive the car to the famous Hollywood Bowl, where he's performing for a series of TV specials. He meets the producer and is immediately obnoxious about where the cameras are going to be positioned. He then says he's going to his dressing room and doesn't want to be disturbed. He tells the same to the security guard, who he is uncharacteristically pleasant to. In his dressing room, he changes into his conductor's outfit and then puts on a raincoat and sunglasses, which makes him look like a spy from a cartoon. The coat sort of makes sense to cover up the outfit, but the sunglasses just look very suspicious. He runs back to the mechanic's garage, which is now closed, and he breaks in via the window he left open and steals his own car to drive to the house of Jenifer Welles, who is playing the piano for her pet bird. He lets himself in and grabs her by the neck in a power move that is completely obnoxious and therefore completely in character. He then takes off his coat. They're having an affair, but she is insisting he divorces his wife or she will make their relationship public. He refuses to do this because his wife's mother is bankrolling his entire career. He eventually agrees and asks her to play Chopin by explaining,
I am so confused I can't understand anything but music tonight.
They're really going all out to make him as obnoxious as possible, and it's working. While she plays, he puts on a pair of gloves, wraps an ashtray with a cloth that he brought with him, and whacks her over the head with it. Yes, smoking does kill. No, I'm not apologising for that joke. He takes the body to the kitchen and arranges it next to the gas oven, which he then switches on. He puts the suicide note he typed into her typewriter and takes the phone off the hook before putting his coat back on. But his lapel flower has fallen off and he doesn't notice. He leaves and sees the neighbour's daughter playing with her dog. She doesn't appear to see him, and so he returns to his dressing room, thinking he's got away with it. He steps out just in time to meet his wife and mother-in-law. I have some issues with this setup, as it's not made entirely clear why he gets completely dressed before going to Jenifer's house. There's certainly no reason for him to wear everything including his tailcoat. It's entirely a plot device so that he can leave the flower behind, but it's noticeable and it just looks odd. He could have just left the flower in the dressing room and put it on when he returned. His producer arrives to let him know that Jenifer Welles hasn't arrived. He acts furiously and asks if the producer has called her. He calls the operator and asks them to cut into her line, giving the operator her full phone number, which his wife Janice clearly thinks is suspicious. Janice Benedict is played by Blythe Danner. Blythe Danner was born February 3rd, 1943 in Pennsylvania. She began her acting career on stage before moving to film and television, with her appearance in Columbo being an early role for her. During which time, however, she was pregnant with her daughter Gwyneth Paltrow. She would go on to have a long career on big and small screen in the films 1776, Future World, the sequel to Westworld, The Great Santini, as well as Meet the Parents and its sequels. On television, she would crop up in guest spots on MASH, St. Elsewhere, and Tales from the Crypt, as well as a recurring role as Will's mother on Will and Grace. She's been an environmental campaigner for over 30 years and is still working in film and television to this day. She is 78. Janice suggests they call the police, so his producer Billy does so, and the concert begins with Jenifer's performance piece being cut. As the concert progresses, Benedict realises his flower is missing and has the briefest moment of panic when he remembers where it is. This is intercut with the police investigating Jenifer's home. We then cut to the concert on TV at the vet's office where Columbo is having his new dog checked out, and we get the first appearance of Columbo's basset hound named Dog. Except at this stage Columbo hasn't named him, as he's only just rescued him from the dog shelter. Dog would be a regular companion of Columbo's for the rest of the series and is hugely welcome addition, as their relationship is really charming and it's the perfect breed for Columbo to own. There's an odd joke where he asks the vet about the name, and the vet suggests Fido, as he's never seen a dog with that name. The actor chooses to play this entirely straight, which I assume is a mistake on his part, as this is clearly a joke, but it ends up making this exchange just a little weird. Although the tone of humour throughout the episode is all a little weird, so maybe it was intentional. Benedict finishes his concert on a high, but is informed of Jenifer's suicide. It then cuts to Columbo speaking to another officer about Jenifer. I understand this scene was part of a series of reshoots to bulk up the episode to a 90-minute running time, but it's a scene I really like, as it gives us an insight into Columbo's character that we don't very often get. He laments that her life has been reduced to a few lines on a crime report, whereas she was a real three-dimensional human being with a life, and he sees murder in every premature death. He wishes everyone would die of old age. It's an incredibly sweet moment, played perfectly by Falk, and explains why Columbo does what he does. He's a romantic who, despite seeing all the evil humans are capable of, wishes he could do more to change it. He then goes to inspect the rest of the crime scene and finds Jenifer's pet bird, who has also succumbed to the effects of the gas, which also upsets Columbo. Benedict arrives and picks up the flower. Columbo notices him doing this, and he acts as if it had just fallen off. Columbo tells him he's a big fan. This is the first time Columbo has fawned over the murderer, but it is a theme that will continue when he meets more famous murderers and is almost certainly a ploy. It's pretty clear he's fairly certain Benedict did it, and it's also pretty clear he saw the flower before Benedict arrives, so now just has to build a case. Another musician, Paul, arrives and is distraught about Jenifer's death. Benedict manages to talk him down and gets him to leave just before he makes his own exit into awaiting news reporters. The TV news crew waiting outside is a little out of place and is only there to make the ending work, so I'm not entirely convinced by the plot device they have set up, as it needs all these moving parts in order to work properly. As Columbo returns to his dog, which he's left in the car, he meets the neighbour's daughter, who berates him for leaving the dog in the car. The girl was a friend of Jenifer's and looked after her bird whenever she was out of town, and she also mocks the name Fido. Columbo suggests Beethoven to the dog, who seems not to like it. I guess he knows he's not a St. Bernard. Benedict returns home and his wife confronts him about knowing Jenifer's phone number, but he's able to smooth talk his way out of it. The next day, Columbo arrives at the Benedict's mansion and is greeted by Mr. Miyagi himself, Pat Morita, playing Benedict's houseboy. This is another reshoot and I don't think it works quite as well as the previous one, certainly not for me. It's a light-hearted scene where Columbo doesn't want to go in and mess up Benedict's beautiful house, but then goes off on a tangent about how much he likes the house and how much did Benedict pay for it, How much did Benedict pay for the furniture, and how much does Benedict earn? He then asks for an autograph. It's a fun little scene, but it's clearly got nothing to do with the investigation and doesn't really serve any purpose other than filler. The next scene is at the mechanics, where Benedict arrives to find Columbo sitting in Benedict's Jaguar. He tells Benedict how much he likes the car, and it's basically a retread of the previous scene, but the difference here is it furthers the plot by having Columbo tell Benedict he thinks Jenifer didn't kill herself. Benedict says he had the same thought but dismissed it, as all the evidence suggests it was suicide. But Columbo says it doesn't make sense for her to kill herself and allow her pet bird to die. That's a really nice touch and completely believable. Benedict tries to dismiss it as her forgetting because she's distraught, but that just doesn't fit with anyone who's ever owned a pet. Benedict leaves and we get a really nice funny scene between Columbo and the mechanic Mike, where Columbo asks him to look at his car, and which Mike replies is beyond help. Columbo is also able to find out that there was nothing wrong with Benedict's car. We then go to Janice and her mother having lunch, where they're interrupted by none other than Commandant Lassard actor George Gaynes. He's a newspaperman who is on the classical music board with Janice's mother, Lizzy Fielding, who uses her influence with him to avoid Benedict being bothered by the press. This scene might be another reshoot, as it has very little to do with the plot, or it may have just been a chance to give Mrs. Fielding more screen time, because Mrs. Fielding is played by screen legend Myrna Loy. Myrna Loy was born Myrna Williams on August 2nd, 1905 in Montana. She relocated to Los Angeles as an adolescent, where she trained as a dancer. Her mother saw the potential in LA and encouraged Loy's father to purchase land there that would go on to earn the family a considerable profit. Her father had remained in Montana and died in the 1918 flu pandemic, so they remained in LA after his death. Her film career started in 1925 as an extra in Pretty Ladies, which would eventually lead to a contract with Warner Brothers, where she would usually play vamps or femme fatales in their early silent films. The advent of talkies coincided with a career slump, which didn't pick up until she was cast as Nora Charles alongside William Powell as Nick Charles in The Thin Man. The huge success of that film catapulted Loy to stardom, and her partnership with Powell would continue in a total of 14 films. During the war years, she would virtually abandon her career to aid the war effort, but would return to her career soon after the war ended, appearing in The Best Years of Our Lives and Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream Home. She would continue in film and television throughout the 50s, 60s and 70s, as well becoming an activist against housing discrimination and for UNESCO. Her last performance was in the sitcom Love Sydney in 1982 before retiring. She died on December 14th, 1993. She was 88. We then go to Benedict finding Columbo playing chopsticks on the piano at the Hollywood Bowl. He's brought Jenifer's typewriter. The note is still in the typewriter, but it doesn't line up with the letters correctly, so must have been put in after it was typed. Columbo then explains to Benedict exactly how Benedict committed the murder, including how his car had additional mileage on it that would go exactly to Jenifer's and back, but of course he can't prove any of this. Columbo's just one more thing is that he's convinced his supervisors that this is a murder and he's been officially assigned to the case, which I think means up until now that he's been investigating for fun, although I guess with his track record his bosses give him a lot of leeway. Columbo then goes to see Paul the musician at a jazz club. He is looking for Paul's help, as he's worked out Paul used to date Jenifer until she dumped him for a new man, but he doesn't know who the new man is. Columbo then goes to see Janice. She shows Columbo the flowers she grows specifically for Benedict's lapel, and he tries to find out if Janice was aware of the affair. Columbo then goes to see the neighbour's kid, who says she saw a guy visit Jenifer's house the day she died. Columbo takes her to see Benedict at a film score recording, but Paul is also there, and she identifies Paul as the man she saw, which really sets Columbo back. With this new information, the board are debating whether to fire Paul or not, and Benedict arrives to give the impression he's there to defend Paul, while actually secretly and subtly twisting the knife. As Mrs. Fielding is telling Paul he is being fired, Columbo reveals he believes Paul's story, and Mrs. Fielding reveals that she would fire anyone who might spoil the orchestra, including Benedict. This gives Columbo Benedict's exact motive. Back at the vet, Dog is getting his last vaccination, and the concert is on in the background again. Columbo realises he can watch the concert if he wants to, as it was recorded. He then goes to see Benedict and Janice at another of Benedict's rehearsals at the Hollywood Bowl. There he shows them both film of Benedict without his flower at the concert, but with it when he was confronted by reporters outside of Jenifer's house. He must have dropped the flower during the murder and picked it up at Jenifer's afterwards. Benedict claims he put it on after the concert, before he went to her house. But he was with Janice that whole time, and she knows he didn't put the flower on while she was with him. Despite his pleading, she refuses to give him a false alibi. I'm not sure this solution is quite clever enough to work. It's almost brilliant, but there are a few too many gaps that make it fall apart. And that's how I feel about the episode as a whole. The idea of the murderer successfully getting rid of an incriminating piece of evidence at the crime scene, but that being the very reason they are caught, because they didn't have it when they should have it, is a really clever idea. But I don't think the execution is quite there, as there are a few too many holes and leaps in logic. Other than that, this is a great episode with good performances all round that's a little different from previous episodes, and we get the introduction of Dog, who is still nameless by the end of the episode. Cassavetes seems to be really enjoying himself, and Falk seems to enjoy having him there. Dana is perfect as the gaslit wife who finally has enough. Myrna is a force to be reckoned with, and the supporting cast are all very memorable too. It's shot really well, and the music seems to have settled into more traditional score without the avant-garde touches of some of season 1's episodes. If they'd just taken one more pass at the script, it might have been a favourite of mine. As it is, I would have to rate this 3 out of 5. Thank you. Goodbye.